I used to believe I understood loyalty, what it looked like, how it felt, how it held two people together. But that belief began to shift the moment Claire Donovan re-entered my life, carrying the kind of ease and warmth that could soften even the hardest truths. She wasn't meant to be more than a familiar presence from my past, yet her return arrived at the worst, or perhaps the most revealing, time of my life. I was engaged to Megan Carter, a woman whose steadiness had once been the anchor I clung to. She planned everything, from our meals to our weekends, with the meticulous care of someone who feared disorder. I admired her discipline, even envied it. But somewhere between the perfectly organized routines and the carefully scheduled wedding meetings, a quiet distance had settled between us, nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just a hollowing subtlety I didn't acknowledge until it was nearly too late. The night Claire walked back into my orbit, it felt like stepping into an old memory that had somehow grown sharper with age. We hadn't spoken in years, yet her smile carried the same unhurried charm I remembered. She greeted me with a soft laugh, as if the time apart had been nothing more than a brief intermission. Megan stood beside me, polite and composed, but I sensed a flicker of discomfort she tried to hide. She had never met Claire before, yet something in her posture hinted at instinct, an instinct I should have paid attention to. Claire's presence unsettled me, not because she disrupted anything outright, but because she illuminated everything that had quietly dimmed within me. A single conversation with her felt effortless in a way that startled me. While Megan talked in bullet points and timetables, Claire drifted between thoughts like she was creating them from watercolor, soft, fluid, but always meaningful. That ease quickly became the problem. I remembered catching Megan watching me that evening, her eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in curiosity. She asked how I knew Claire, and I gave her the simplest version of the truth: an old friend, someone I used to be close to before life went in different directions. Megan nodded, but I could tell she heard more in my tone than I intended to reveal. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I lay awake replaying the brief, unexpected reunion. Claire's voice lingered like a faint echo, warm, familiar, and dangerously easy to fall back into. I didn't know what to make of the unease curling in my stomach. Was it nostalgia, restlessness, or something much more complicated? Whatever it was, it marked the beginning of a shift I didn't yet understand. And though nothing had happened between us, not yet, the fault line had already formed. I felt it. And deep down, I think Megan did too. Michael tried to convince himself that the unease he felt was nothing more than exhaustion, the natural result of juggling long work hours and the emotional weight of an upcoming wedding. Yet the feeling persisted, clinging to him like a shadow he could neither name nor shake off. Even as he sat across from Emily in their favorite cafe, his mind kept circling back to the same silent question: why am I suddenly seeing her in a different light? Emily had always been the friend he could rely on. She understood him with a clarity that felt almost instinctive, finishing his thoughts before he even voiced them. That afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows and caught the copper strands of her hair, he noticed how her smile softened the hard edges of his day. It unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, reading him the way only she could. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Just tired." But Emily didn't buy it. "You've been saying that a lot lately." Michael hesitated. He wanted to be honest, but honesty felt like a door he wasn't sure he should open. "It's the wedding. Planning. Pressure. You know." Emily held his gaze for a moment longer, then leaned back, accepting the explanation or pretending to. "Well, if you need to breathe, I'm here. No judgment." Her words were simple, but they carried warmth that settled into his chest. And that warmth, he realized, was becoming too familiar. Later that night, when he returned home, Ashley greeted him with a tight smile. She was surrounded by wedding brochures, color swatches, and neatly written lists. Everything was organized, precise, exactly her style. She was efficient, responsible, loyal. She was also growing more distant, though neither of them had said it aloud. "You're late again," she said, her voice polite but flat. "I know. I'm sorry. Work ran long." She nodded and continued flipping through a catalogue. "We need to finalize the seating arrangement." Michael sat beside her, trying to focus, but his mind drifted back to the cafe, to Emily's laughter, to the way she listened without expecting anything, to the comfort that came so easily. Ashley noticed his distraction. "Are you with me?" "Of course," he replied, forcing his attention toward the papers in front of them. But the moment felt thin, fragile, as if the wrong word might split it open. They worked side by side in silence, an invisible distance growing between them. And for the first time, Michael wondered if he was losing something he hadn't yet understood or gaining something he wasn't ready to face. When he finally lay down to sleep, one truth echoed louder than the rest. His life was changing, and he no longer knew which part of it he could trust. The following week unfolded with a strange, simmering tension, one Michael felt but didn't know how to articulate. Everything in his life looked the same from a distance, yet up close, edges no longer aligned the way they used to. He noticed it in how Ashley spoke to him, in how Emily listened, and most of all, in how he responded to both of them. Emily texted him more often now. Short messages at first: "Did you eat? Surviving Monday? Don't forget to drink water." Harmless words, simple check-ins, the kind of things friends said. But every message seemed to land in a part of him that had been neglected without him realizing it. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he found himself driving to Emily's apartment instead of heading home. He told himself he just needed a familiar voice, someone who could unravel his stress with a conversation. But as he stood outside her door, he felt the weight of his choice settle over him. Emily opened the door with a surprised smile. "You look like you need a break." He exhaled, relieved. "You have no idea." She ushered him inside, and the warm glow of her living room felt like a refuge. They talked for hours about work, about life, about everything and nothing. Emily laughed easily, listened intently, and challenged him when he tried to downplay his feelings. She had a way of making him feel seen, truly seen, without asking for anything in return. At one point, when their conversation paused naturally, Emily studied him with a quiet seriousness. "Michael, is everything okay between you and Ashley?" The question landed like a stone in his chest. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say everything was perfect, that the stress was temporary, that he was simply overwhelmed. But the truth stood between them, undeniable. "I don't know," he admitted softly. "It feels like we're slipping, and I don't know how to stop it." Emily's expression softened. "It happens. Relationships change. People change." Her voice held no judgment, just understanding. And that understanding pulled him closer emotionally in a way he hadn't expected. They sat in silence, the kind that felt strangely intimate. Michael felt the air shift, not because anything inappropriate was happening, but because he was beginning to rely on her in ways he hadn't intended. Emily seemed to sense the same thing and eventually stood, breaking the moment with a gentle smile. "You should get some rest," she said softly. He nodded, grateful and conflicted. When he stepped back into the cool night air, he felt both lighter and heavier, relieved by her presence, burdened by what it meant. As he drove away, a realization settled over him with quiet certainty. Emily wasn't just someone he trusted. She was becoming someone he needed. And that truth, he knew, would eventually demand an answer he wasn't ready to give. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Michael and Ashley became harder to disguise. What once felt like the natural friction of wedding stress now resembled a widening gap, one filled with unspoken questions and the faint echo of something unresolved. Michael tried to convince himself that it was temporary, but every time he and Ashley spoke, he felt as though they were performing roles they no longer believed in. Ashley noticed it too, though she hid her concern behind efficiency. She filled their evenings with checklists and timelines, pushing forward with plans that were supposed to symbolize their future. But each decision, flower arrangements, venue details, menu tastings, felt less like excitement and more like pressure closing in around him. One night, as they sat on opposite ends of the couch reviewing table settings, Ashley finally spoke what neither of them had dared to say. "Michael," she began quietly, "are you still happy?" The question struck him with unexpected force. He looked up, finding her eyes steady but anxious. She wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing. She was afraid. "I'm trying," he said, the words heavy with honesty he could no longer avoid. Her breath caught. Trying shouldn't be the answer. He didn't respond. Because she was right, and they both knew it. The silence that followed was long, fragile, and full of truths they weren't ready to confront. Ashley closed the binder slowly, as though admitting that something far more important needed attention. "Is there someone else?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's pulse quickened, not because he had betrayed her, but because he realized how easily he could have. "No," he said immediately. It was the truth, but it didn't erase the weight of Emily's presence in his thoughts. Ashley nodded, though her expression suggested the answer wasn't enough. She set the binder aside. "Then what's wrong?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no clear explanation formed. How was he supposed to tell her that somewhere along the way, they had stopped growing together? That her voice no longer soothed him the way it once had? That his heart had begun to drift even if he didn't fully understand why? Before he could speak, his phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you today." Ashley glanced at the screen, and the subtle shift of her expression told him she recognized the name. Not jealousy. Not suspicion. Something quieter, fear that she was losing him without a fight. "Go ahead," Ashley said softly. "Answer her." He didn't. He turned his phone face down and met Ashley's eyes instead, but the damage was already done. The moment revealed more than words could have. Ashley stood, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "We can't keep pretending this is fine." He watched her walk away, each step widening the gap he had been desperately trying to ignore. And for the first time, Michael understood the full depth of what he was risking, not just a relationship, but a future that was beginning to crumble beneath him. The next morning arrived heavy with the residue of the conversation Michael had avoided finishing. He woke before sunrise, the weight of unease settling across his chest like an unwelcome visitor. Ashley was already up, moving quietly through the kitchen, her silence deliberate but not cruel. It was the kind of silence that understood too much. He joined her, unsure of what to say or how to bridge the distance between them. She handed him a cup of coffee without a word, her fingers brushing his only briefly before she withdrew. The gesture was habitual, yet it carried a finality he couldn't ignore. "We need space," Ashley said gently, her eyes fixed on the window rather than on him. "Not forever. Just, for now. To think." Michael swallowed, the truth both painful and relieving. "If that's what you want." "It's what we need," she corrected, her voice steady. "We've been holding on so tightly to a future we never stopped to see if we were still walking toward it together." He nodded, unable to argue. She was right, and the honesty stung because of it. They agreed he would stay with a friend for a few days while they figured things out. There was no yelling, no accusations, only the quiet sorrow of two people acknowledging the widening space between them. Later that afternoon, after packing a small bag and stepping out into the cool breeze, Michael found himself driving without a destination. His thoughts swirled, colliding with memories, fears, and questions he had ignored for too long. When his phone buzzed, he glanced at the screen. "Emily. Are you free? I'm worried about you." He hesitated. A part of him knew he should keep his distance, at least until his life stopped feeling like it was coming apart at the seams. But another part, the one desperate for clarity and comfort, responded before he could talk himself out of it. "Yeah. Can we talk?" Emily invited him over, and within 20 minutes he was standing at her door again. When she opened it, her expression softened instantly. "You look exhausted," she murmured. "It's been a long day." She stepped aside, letting him in. The atmosphere inside her home was calm, warm, so different from the tension he had left behind. They sat on the couch, and Emily waited, giving him space to speak. "Ashley and we're taking time apart," he finally said. Emily's breath caught. "I'm sorry. I know that's hard." He nodded. "It is. But I think it was coming." She didn't reach for him, didn't offer rushed reassurances. Instead, she listened, her presence steady and grounding. And it was that steadiness, the way she made room for his pain without trying to shape it, that made something inside him shift even further. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "I don't know where this ends." Emily looked at him, her eyes full of empathy and something deeper she didn't voice. "Then let's take it one step at a time. You don't have to figure everything out tonight." Her words soothed the turmoil inside him, but they also carried an unspoken truth neither of them dared acknowledge. Because in that quiet apartment, in the warmth of her presence, Michael felt the first flicker of something dangerous. A sense of belonging he no longer felt at home. The days that followed were a quiet storm. Michael moved between Emily's apartment, work, and fleeting visits to Ashley's house, each interaction a reminder of the complicated choices he had made. Ashley maintained her distance with a grace that was both heartbreaking and dignified. She didn't call, didn't demand explanations, she simply gave space, letting the emptiness speak louder than any argument could. Michael felt the weight of her absence in every routine gesture he once took for granted. Emily, on the other hand, became a safe harbor. She listened without judgment, laughed without expectation, and offered understanding without complication. Yet even in her presence, Michael felt the tension of morality pressing against his heart. He hadn't crossed the line in action, but the pull of emotional intimacy was undeniable. Each smile, each lingering glance, each shared silence drew him closer to a truth he feared. Feelings were dangerous, and he was already entangled. One evening, they sat on Emily's balcony, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Do you ever wonder if we're making mistakes by giving in to what feels natural? Michael asked, his voice low, almost lost in the night. Emily didn't answer immediately. She let her gaze linger on the horizon, thoughtful. Mistakes aren't always clear in the moment, she finally said. Sometimes you only see them when you look back. He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He wanted to tell her that he was conflicted, that his loyalty to Ashley still lingered like a shadow he couldn't outrun. But saying it aloud seemed to diminish the very honesty they were sharing. So he stayed quiet, letting the understanding between them speak instead. The sound of a phone vibrating broke the fragile calm. Michael glanced at the screen, Ashley's name. He hesitated, torn between worlds. He didn't answer. Not yet. He couldn't. Not until he understood what he wanted, and even then, the answer wasn't simple. Emily reached out and rested her hand over his. A small, almost imperceptible gesture, but heavy with meaning. The contact was grounding, a tether in a life that suddenly felt unsteady. Michael felt a swell of gratitude and guilt simultaneously. He realized, with a painful clarity, that the line between friendship and something deeper had already blurred. He had crossed it in thought, in longing, even if he hadn't yet crossed it in deed. As he stared at the lights stretching into infinity, Michael understood the truth he had been avoiding. Life doesn't always wait for clarity. Sometimes it demands decisions before you are ready, and sometimes those decisions define everything that follows. He looked at Emily, and she looked back, their silence filled with unspoken acknowledgement. They both knew what was happening, even if neither could name it. And in that shared recognition, a quiet reckoning began. Because in trusting her, in letting things unfold, Michael realized he was stepping into a path that might lead to loss, heartbreak, or redemption, but it was a path he could no longer avoid. Time passed like a slow tide, washing over the spaces Michael had once taken for granted. Ashley didn't reach out, and neither did he, not immediately. The quiet absence between them spoke more than any conversation could, a reminder that some fractures cannot be mended with words alone. He carried the weight of what had been lost, the laughter, the shared routines, the comfort of certainty, with a tenderness that both haunted and grounded him. Emily remained, a constant presence in a life that had begun to feel unsteady yet strangely alive. Their connection had deepened, not through drama or grand gestures, but through shared silence, honesty, and understanding. Even now, each touch, each glance, was a subtle reminder of how easily trust and intimacy could slip into something both healing and dangerous. He cherished it but approached it cautiously, aware of the fragility that had defined his recent past. One evening, Michael sat alone on Emily's balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly before him. He reflected on the choices he had made, on the people he had loved, and the boundaries he had crossed, not with action, but with thought, longing, and unspoken need. He realized that loyalty was more than physical fidelity, it was attention, intention, and emotional honesty. In failing to recognize the full weight of those responsibilities, He had endangered everything that truly mattered. Ashley's face appeared in his mind, soft, disappointed, dignified, and he felt a pang of regret that was neither fleeting nor easily assuaged. She had been steadfast, loving, and patient, and in the moments he had failed her, he had learned the depth of what it meant to betray, not through betrayal of the body, but of the heart. The realization settled over him, heavy and unshakable. Emily's hand brushed against his as he sat there, and he looked at her, understanding the unspoken truth between them. They were companions now in the quiet aftermath, bound by trust, yet acutely aware of the fragility surrounding them. Their connection was real, yet tempered by the knowledge of loss, by the echoes of a past he could not rewrite. In the stillness, Michael whispered to himself, "Life unfolds whether you are ready or not. Choices define paths. And sometimes, even in love, we must accept what cannot be returned." He leaned back, letting the cool night air fill his lungs, and felt a mixture of sorrow and clarity. He had survived the unraveling, had faced the consequences of emotional missteps, and had begun to understand the complex, delicate architecture of human relationships. As he watched the city glow, he knew that the future remained uncertain, that heartbreak could return, and that trust, once shaken, would never be quite the same. But he also knew something else. He had learned to see, to feel, and to honor the subtle boundaries between love, loyalty, and longing. And for the first time in months, Michael felt a quiet acceptance, a fragile peace. Because he understood now that sometimes, letting life unfold is not about control, it is about choosing the lessons worth carrying forward and the memories worth keeping alive.